You might live in an area where the council has declared a climate emergency, with Canterbury, Lewis and Crawley all voting to do so in the last week. Shelley Phelps has more.
Taking to the streets to demand faster action against climate change.
Extinction!
This week saw the Extinction rebellion group launch what they're calling a summer uprising. The public are increasingly concerned about climate change, especially young people.
No, that's why I've got the sheet in the car.
Nina and Ingrid say they've been inspired to take action closer to home. The Montessori Place students have launched a petition calling on the council to go fossil fuel free in 10 years.
It was just mainly this problem and hearing about it in the news, and also all the things that Extinction Rebellion has done. We thought it would be a great way to contribute, I think, because we started on a local level. I think it's very doable to get signatures. And
totally, because if people at a local level start, then it will build up until 2030. No more carbon, which would be really great.
A growing number of councils have been declaring climate emergencies in response to a report by leading scientists which called for global warming to be limited to 1.5 degrees. Wealden District Council is set to be next.
We really do have a serious problem, and not so much for us, I think, but for our grandchildren. And the council needs to take a lead.
Some people say that what we're seeing from councils is just virtue signalling or jumping on the bandwagon.
I'm not interested in gesture politics, and I hesitated about this recommendation on those grounds, but we have got a solid record and we want to build on that solid record, and if we don't do anything, you know, say it's all got down to somebody else, then we're not giving leadership to the local community and to our fellow residents. So we've got to do what we can.
Just over half of councils in our area have declared a climate emergency. Some have committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2050, whilst others want an earlier deadline of 2030.
Some say that all this talk from councils isn't being backed up with enough action. Is enough being done to cut down on car use, for example? In Wealden, opposition councillors say more should be done to provide charge points for electric cars, which emit less greenhouse gases. The big issues facing the planet can sometimes feel beyond the power of any individual. But there's one corner of the earth you can control, and that's your garden. Dave GOULSON is a biology professor at the University of Sussex, who's written a book about gardening to save the planet.
You plant a tree, as soon as it starts to grow, it's locking up carbon, it's taking carbon out of the air and turning it into wood. And when it flowers, if it's a fruit tree, then it's providing food for insects in the spring from the blossom, and then it provides food for us later in the year when it fruits. So, you know, it's kind of wins all round. So if everyone was to try and grow a tree or two in their garden and try and grow a few fruits and vegetables and not buy any of that horrible peat-based compost, then it would all start to add up.
There's a limit to what councils can do, but they want to send the message that climate change isn't a problem we can just walk away from.
Shelley Phelps with our report. I'm joined now by Alison Plaumer. Alison is the founder member of the Brighton branch of Extinction Rebellion, the climate change campaign group. Alison, let's start with direct action. You're pro-direct action as a group, presumably as an individual. Why?
Because direct action works. If you look at how we've caused change in societies, because society arguably is just a collection of ideas, and that the ideas at the moment aren't actually helping reduce climate chaos, because we've got climate chaos now. And direct action works because if you look at people like Martin Luther King or the suffragettes or you know, all those absolutely amazing people, we were very inspired by them. And that's you know, people on the streets, then what happens is you interrupt business as usual, because we want to interrupt business as usual.
But what gives you the right to do that? Take, for instance, I know that you spent 3 days blocking the routes around Marble Arch in April.
I did, yeah.
Who or what authorises you, gives you the right to do that to everybody else and disrupt their lives?
That's a very interesting question. Who gives anybody the right to do anything, Julia? You know, who decides what rights we do and don't have? And at the moment, what we feel is we've got the right to a future. as I'm sure you know, the United Nations Secretary at the end of last year, after the IPCC report, 6,000 scientists, 97% of the scientists, we've got climate chaos. And if we don't do anything, he said that we have an exponential threat to humanity. It's so serious that if we don't do anything within the next 6 months, we're headed for irreversible loops and irreversible climate change. So massive reduction in climate.
Okay. Your organisation's issued a list of demands, I've read them, under the threat of disruption. But it feels like you're sidestepping democracy here. What are you doing that actually brings people along with you? Because in the end, this has got to be a democratic choice, hasn't it? For the country, for individual authorities.
Absolutely. Actually, we would argue the opposite of that, because one of our proposals is about creating what we call a citizens' assembly, which is where, you know, like jury service, people get randomly selected, so we have all the demographics, everybody represented.
So you can't put your hand up and say, I want to be on it. You have to be chosen in order to ensure
like you know the word jury service happens where people are randomly chosen. People come onto that and then work with the science instead of working with politics, because we would argue that politics, the political system is broken. You know, it's kind of beyond politics now. And this is something that concerns all of us. And I know everybody around this table. Sorry, I need to stop.
No, I want to bring in everyone around the table. Hold that thought. Zoe, one of your first acts as leader of Lewes District Council was to declare a climate emergency. What for you does that mean? And also, and I know you've been asked this already, what does it cost?
So what it means is that we absolutely have to take action. So as Greta Thunberg says, our house is burning and we have to do something about it. It's on fire. And we have to get the council, well, the council has already unanimously, I would say, with our Conservative colleagues, has committed to reducing emissions to net zero by 2030, which is much further than the government's current commitment. And it means that we will, first of all, understand, well, what are our emissions as a council, because...
So you've got to do that before you can even begin to cut them.
Okay. So you have to measure, and then you have to benchmark, and then you have to take the action that's necessary. And I think the thing that's interesting in your film earlier on is that, you know, we have to be climate leaders, and we have to be climate action leaders, but we also have to really follow through with that. And we're currently in a situation which is that in national government is removing subsidies. We subsidise fossil fuel industry by some 10 billion a year. You know, we're simply not doing enough, and that's the reason why people like Alison and many people who live in my district are joining Extinction Rebellion.
So there's some serious sympathy there. You were interestingly nodding away. I don't know if that indicates approval, Tim, when Alison was talking about the Citizens' Assembly idea.
I wasn't nodding at that.
Oh, that wasn't what you were agreeing.
Although I've been asked to go along to my local Extinction Rebellion Citizens' Assembly, which I'm doing. I'm going to a meeting with them tomorrow, and I got together with them a couple of weeks ago. And where I just take issue, because you're absolutely right, this is a common agenda now, and actually the political parties now all buy into this. My council has done the same as yours. Both Ada and Wealden councils committed to 2030 unilaterally. Everybody bought into that. So the political parties are agreeing. So we don't need direct action to try and get the political parties actually to agree and do something on this. So I spoke to my Extinction Rebellion. They were doing a die in every farmer's market in front of my street surgery, which was actually becoming a bit counterproductive because people in wheelchairs and things were not able to get through, and there were complaints. So I said to them, look, why don't we sit down and have a talk about this? They invited me along. I sat down with 30 of them. We found, surprise, surprise, there's rather more we agree on than we don't. We're now jointly sorting an environment fair, a green day of action. I do an eco tip at their suggestion on my weekly videos. Lots of stuff, practical stuff we can do, but it's all about how we can make it easier for more people to be able to buy into that, because the door is open, they want to do that, and how we can push the government to do more and more quickly and with much more enthuasm than we've had in the past.
Let me just bring Karen in, as she's been excluded so far and everyone else has had a say. I mean, where is Labour on this? Because it always feels that there's a risk that Labour is outflanked by the newer parties or the newer ways of doing it.
We welcome the Extinction Rebellion. You know, I've been along to local meetings. We've got lively groups going on in across Thanet. I've been across and supported the young people in Canterbury. I think it's great that they're energising and that they're on a mission and they're making sure that everybody knows about this.
But where's Labour?
Well, we have got our own transition plans. We've got our own targets in place. I mean, we're particularly interested in this concept of a just transition from carbon dependency for communities, for employees, etc. So there's a lot of work, a lot of good jobs that could be created in that section of society. 30 million boilers, gas boilers that need to be replacing. These are jobs for people.
Mine.
This is a good thing to move forward to.
Alison, come back in.
I was just going to say, Tim, yes, I'm sure there's a lot of agreement, but actually what we would argue is it's come on the agenda because of our action. You know, if you look at climate debates about a year ago in Parliament, no one came. Now what's happened is we are actually being listened to. The national conversation has actually changed around climate chaos, because it is, it is climate chaos that we've got now. We've got 6 months to actually really decarbonise as quickly as possible, so it's urgent. And your government has said the 2050 target, that's way too late. We'll have a dead planet by then.
Do you think it's too late?
Oh, it is.
So should it be 20?
But within a few years, 2050 will have become 2040, and as technology moves ahead at a rate of knots, it'll be sooner than that. But look, let's realise we are the first government with a legally enforceable binding target for carbon neutral in the whole world. Let's celebrate
Tim,
that.
I do want to jump in,
push that open door. Look at what's happened on renewables.
You're also
in this
the
country.
closest person around this table to the man who's most likely to be the next Prime Minister, who equivocates on the climate. Yes. Boris Johnson,
no, he doesn't.
He absolutely does equivocate
Absolutely
on the climate.
not.
So you think he's completely, I mean, this is a guy who's talked about...
We produced the Conservative Environmental Network Manifesto. There's some really good stuff in this manifesto, endorsed by Boris. He contributed to it.
Professor David King, who worked with Boris Johnson as a climate expert during his time as Foreign Secretary, says that he oversaw devastating cuts in efforts to tackle climate change. Does that not concern you?
What devastating cuts?
But it was cuts to the attachés who are working around the world from 165 to 65. He also wrote an article in 2013 where he said he had an open mind about the encroachment of an ice age.
This is at a time when the amount of global environmental work done through the International Development Department, with 0.7% commitment from us, is really doing lots to help developing countries make sure they are developing sustainably and is environmentally possible as well. Boris is absolutely signed up to that.
Would he push
absolutely signed up.
I'm really sorry. Can I just ask?
Absolutely.
Would Boris Johnson push Donald Trump on his continued climate denial?
Absolutely he would, as all the rest of us, as all the rest of us do. But he doesn't listen to Jeremy Corbyn because nobody takes Jeremy Corbyn seriously.
I know this is a passion for lots of people here, but so is our next subject.